Gopan. Let me attempt at my second name, which is Shivashankaran. That's my second name. I've been working with Secureworks for. I'll be getting onto my 8th year in next month. I'll be completing 7 years next month. So I was one of the first employees of Secureworks in this region. Overall, I've been in security for over 16 years. So I've worked as a SOC analyst. I've worked as an implementation person. I've worked as architect. I've been in different roles. Currently, I lead the pre-sales team for Secureworks in the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa. That's my current role. Now, the topic of the day is cybersecurity beyond SIEM. So you may be wondering who is Secureworks before that. So let me spend maybe a couple of minutes on who we are. So Secureworks is the security arm of Dell Technologies. So we have been operational for 22 years. So we started in 1998. So we have been a pure play cybersecurity company. We got acquired by Dell in 2011. So we became Dell Secureworks. Some of you would remember that name, Dell Secureworks as such. And then in 2016, we went public again. We became Secureworks, but with majority of the stakes owned by Dell. So we are one of those 7 companies part of Dell Technologies. Predominantly, we do managed security services. We've been doing that for many years. We have 4,100 clients globally whom we are doing security monitoring for. So these 4,100 clients are located in 59 countries. From these many companies, we collect about 400 billion events every single day. And what we do in a nutshell is to find the needle in the haystack. Right? So understanding what is that incident, that particular incident that matters out of those millions of events which would come onto the platform. So that's what we do in the nutshell. I'll get into details in the coming slides, but my presentation is more on the overall approach organization should be taking in terms of SOC, in terms of security monitoring, in terms of threat detection. I would put it that way. And then towards the end, we'll talk a little bit more on specific to Secureworks. But I would try to keep it very much of a thought leadership kind of a session with that kind of a theme. So you may feel free to ask questions during the session. We will be monitoring the chat. Let me start with there is a poll. So let's do that first. So if you can do that, that's the first one. We'll be having few more polls during the screen. From a security operations center challenge perspective, we can talk about number of challenges. So I've listed down 3 here. So the number one challenge I would see is visibility, or I would say lack of visibility. Right. So you're not sure what is happening within your organization. How do we make sure that we have a very good understanding of what is happening on my endpoints, what is happening on my network, what is happening with other parts of my applications, my database? Am I very sure that no threat actor is present inside my network? How do I ensure that? So lack of visibility is the biggest challenge. I sit in front of CISOs, CIOs, ask questions. So gone are the days when people really bring you down. Now most of these threat actors are present inside your network, right? So when somebody says that I have never had a breach in last many years, that's not a valid attestation that there is nobody present inside your network, right? So that's one of the biggest challenge, lack of visibility. Second biggest challenge is the complexity, right? Now you may have whoever listening to me could ask, like, how many security controls you have in your environment. You may have your firewalls, your IPS, your web application firewalls, your proxies, your antivirus, your EDRs, whatever solutions you have. This would be throwing thousands of alerts at the central system. If there is a log retention platform, SIEM platform, whatever that is, how do you make sure that what I'm getting is true positive? Okay, so that's one of the biggest challenge. Millions of logs coming to a platform and finding that thing that matter. That's extremely complex stuff. And the third problem is, let's assume that first two are sorted. You have got visibility. You got a system which would understand what is true positive. Okay, now you have confirmed that something is bad. What do you do about it? Right? Do we have enough skill within the organization to do incident response? So when I say incident response, this may involve multiple facets, right? So one could be a technical incident response, which is making sure that you do an emergency IR. So in terms of compromise assessment, threat hunting, malware reverse engineering, you may have to do that part. You also will have to do a I would say the soft part of the incident response, where you need to make sure that how do you handle the incident. You may have to communicate to the board. You may have internal communications. You may have external communications. You may have to communicate to the media. There's a reputation risk at stake. How do you do that? So you need expertise to do that, and these resources are very difficult to retain or maintain. So if you're a bank, your core business is banking, not information security. So it is very difficult to retain these individuals in that. So incident response is very difficult, and there is a proactive element also to this. What I mean by that is, you may have an incident response plan, okay, but this plan could be very old or maybe non-existent, right? Now, how often do you practice your incident response plan, right? I mean, I'm a firm believer that you can't get at anything really good in life unless you practice. So how often do you practice this? You don't want to be practicing in the middle of an actual incident. So you may have to do tabletop exercise. You may want to do some sort of war gaming, or you may have to have proper playbooks in place. And that's when you do the, so I can go on and on various different challenges, but in a nutshell, I've mentioned three challenges. So first is visibility, lack of visibility. Second is complexity, and third is incident response. So these are the three challenges, and let's see how in the last many years organizations has addressed these challenges. There is one more poll on the thing. It'll be great if you could answer that. So very much aligned with what I was talking about in terms of your biggest security challenges. What keeps you up at night? So please answer that. Let me move to the next slide, which is about SIEM. So we are talking about cybersecurity beyond SIEM. So beyond SIEM, we should first talk about what is SIEM, right? So SIEM will help you to do a few things, right? So at least you go to any SIEM solution, they'll talk about identifying blind spots, talk about reducing noise, talk about helping you to do incident response. And I've been in this space for a while, and I've seen lots of SIEM solutions mentioning all of this. Many a times, unfortunately, this all end up being false promises, right? So SIEM solutions really fail to deliver this many times. Now, when I sit in front of people, they say like, oh, we had a pretty old SIEM, ArcSide SIEM or something, which is kind of, we are trying to renew that. We are probably trying to change that with a modern SIEM, assuming that the problem will be solved by changing the SIEM. So they may get better nice flashy dashboards and things like that. But probably that's not the problem, right? SIEM solutions are good, but the problem may be slightly beyond that to solve these challenges, right? Now, let's look at that. The way SIEM solutions evolved over the last 20 years, this is a slide which I took from Gartner. So Gartner did a risk security summit, and they presented this, and I really like that the way they approached or expressed the way SIEM solutions was kind of looked at in the last 20 years, and also how this is going to evolve in the next 5 years. 20 years is too much. Next 4 or 5 years, right? Now, if you look at the left part, so in early 2000s, they talk about security event management, security information management, SIEM and SIEM and all, and then combined to SIEM, security information event management, in 2005 timeframe. And in the last probably few years, maybe I would say 3 to 4 years, we have seen serious amount of improvements on that space, be it SOAR capabilities, be it UEBA capabilities, behavior analytics kind of capabilities, be it a common data lake and apply correlations onto a data lake, apply. There are lots of tools available, right? The Hadoops and Kafkas and all that. So this is the way it was kind of evolving over the last many years. And today, we are at a very important junction, right? So XDR as the terminology evolved now in 2020. And from here, the way now every vendor is talking about XDR, right? So the way it's going to evolve in the next few years, the way Gartner has shown 3 different directions, right? So many of these vendors will encroach extinction. So some of the old SIEM platforms, they may not be good for use in some time. So they are not doing enough developments. So that could probably go in that mode. The modern SIEM, would gradually evolve. So when I say modern SIEM, the SIEM solutions that are currently being used by and very popular, used by lots of the end organization, most of you would be using a SIEM solution. They're going to evolve gradually. Um, they will have their own space in the coming years. What Gartner has actually mentioned is the ones who are going to really excel in the next coming years would be the ones who are AI enabled. Somebody who is using less of human beings and more of machine learning, who has a serious amount of artificial intelligence being applied. That's a big shift we are seeing. We saw Google releasing this backstory, Microsoft coming up with the Sentinel. So that's a space where there are one or two common elements which you see there. One element is they're all born in the cloud. So they're not moving their SIEM on-prem SIEM solution to cloud and calling it a cloud SIEM. That's not the theme. Those SIEM solutions are cloud native. They're born in the cloud. Second thing is the content management in the SIEM. That is always a responsibility of the vendor, not with the end user or with the partner or anybody in the middle. That's always the responsibility lies with the people who manufactures or who has the platform, who owns the platform. Right now, a SIEM solution will definitely need to be made sure that you are keeping it up to date on a regular basis. So that part is pretty much taken care on the new. I would say there is no terminology which Gartner or somebody says next gen SIEM or something, but that's where it is heading right now. There is no point in talking about this part because that is the bottom one, which is gonna die pretty soon. Let's talk about the middle piece, right? So the ones who are the modern SIEM, the ones who would evolve gradually. So let's talk a little bit on that. Now, a typical characteristics of a SIEM, if you look at it in layman terms, it's very simple. You collect the logs from as many places as you can, from your cloud, from your infrastructure on-prem, from your endpoints, applications, proxies, databases. You put into a central system and you have alerts coming out of. That's a kind of a way SIEM solutions work. Now, one of the biggest disadvantage or maybe a challenge, I would say, is extremely high implementation cost. So you start, you bring the best SIEM in the world, in the modern SIEM, and you bring the best person who's implementing a SIEM, the most certified or most knowledgeable person. Still, you are starting it from scratch. A SIEM solution will take anywhere between 36 to 48 to maybe 60 months to get to a decent matured state. By the time you create your use cases, your correlation rules, people who are in this space who have tried this would understand what I'm trying to say. Extremely high implementation cost, and then ongoing cost, tuning, maintenance, that is extremely expensive. There is another poll on the screen, so please do it. That's more from a cloud adoption within your organization. Going to the screen, so licensing is another big challenge, right? So I know there are many CIOs in this forum. The commercial predictability is quite important, as much as risk reduction, especially in the post-pandemic era. We need to make sure that there is some sort of a predictability in terms of how much you need to pay to make sure that you are still managing your regular security monitoring. Now, most of these SIEM solutions are licensed in two ways. So one is based on events per second, or second is based on the consumption, the storage per day, right? How much you consume on a daily basis. Now, I was recently having a conversation with one of the CISOs who mentioned like he has disabled his Blue Code proxy logs to the Splunk platform because he's really worried about the monthly bill that would come onto his plate, right? He may not get approval from the CIO to do that. Now, from a risk reduction point of view, as a security professional, I believe that is ridiculous to disable a Splunk, disable a Blue Code proxy log to the SIEM platform, because proxy is so much of wealth of information which can give you about the user authentication, the user details, and you know what I'm talking about. Now that is disabled because it is throwing lots of alerts at you. So the licensing cost is extremely difficult because you often end up paying much more than what you originally thought you would be paying. So the more you ingest, the more you pay. There is absolutely no way you can predict this. And this is true for lots of these SIEM solutions in the backend. That's from a technology part. Now somebody needs to monitor this, right? There's no point in installing a SIEM and then just keeping it. I mean, someone needs to really look at it. Somebody needs to monitor that. So monitoring you can do either in-house, so bringing a team of people monitoring it in-house, or you could do it outsource it to somebody else, or you can have somewhere in the middle, maybe a hybrid model, few people on-prem, few people remote, whatever that model. So let's look at the first option here, which is the in-house option. Now, when you look at an in-house monitoring, I thought about this, and I didn't even put a slide or anything for 8x5. I've seen 8x5 monitoring being proposed by lots of people, but 8x5 monitoring is as if you are assuming that the threat actors or hackers or bad people, whoever that is, they work only from Monday to Friday, right? With the weekends. Unfortunately, that's not the world we are living in, right? So you need to, if you're having a SOC, you should have 24/7. Otherwise, just don't do it, right? So 24/7 is a fundamental requirement to have a SOC, and to run 24/7 SOC, I just looked at the kind of roles you need, right? So the bare minimum, the most conservative number. So you need to have 6 SOC analysts, bare minimum, level 1, level 2, whatever you call it. Between them, you should have 6 of them. I put 1 SOC manager, a Superman who will never take vacations, who will never fall sick, kind of a guy. Took 1. I took a couple of incident responders. So you need somebody to handle your incidents. So that's a bare minimum, right? You need to have 9 people. In my view, you need to have probably 12 to 13 people. So even as bare minimum. I just took this as an example so that people understand this, right? I didn't put any dollar value attached to these roles, but again, because that depends on the countries, that depends on the kind of quality of people. So it varies big time. But you need to bring, some of these resources are very expensive, right? So you need to have incident response, you need to have SOC analysis. These are very expensive resources. Unfortunately, there is almost zero unemployment in security. Probably fortunate for security people, there is, for every 20 jobs out there, there is only 1 right candidate. So security is so hot. So it's very difficult to retain talent. So that's very, very difficult. And you may have somebody train them on your SIEM, he may leave, right? So it's very difficult. So this is a challenge from a in-house perspective. Now, let's look at the managed security service. So if you look at a managed security service, I would like to bring some of the general terminologies associated with managed security service, because that's a big term, managed security service. Now, it could be remote SIEM monitoring, somebody installing a SIEM, monitoring it remotely, or this could mean platform management, device management, vulnerability management. This could be anything, right? So managed security service is kind of mentioned as lots of areas. Now, one big area of managed security services, alert monitoring. At least within the scope of our discussion today, I would like to focus around alert monitoring, not device management and vulnerability management, other things. Alert monitoring. Now, when you look at alert monitoring, the biggest caution I would say is many a times it end up being a bell ringing service. Hello, Mr. Customer, there is a problem. Now here you go, and informing the client that there is an issue. Now, what do you do with this? Where is the context? Okay, many a times there is no investigation. So absolutely no investigation. So they have an SLA to meet within 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever the SLA is. They need to inform to the client that there is a problem, and this problem could be false positive or true positive. There is no validation. So there is no SLA that we will be raising only true positive alerts. No, there is no SLA on that, right? Now, there is a lack of investigation. That's a big challenge. The other challenges is there is no incident response, no threat hunting. These are not provided as a mandatory component as part of the managed security service provider. These are very much optional. So when you see RFPs which talk about incident response being optional, I generally try to include incident response in almost everything I respond to, because incident response is so core to do this. Same thing with threat hunting. Unless you proactively look for what you're looking and still waiting for the alerts, that may not be the right approach. So this is a kind of a caution for managed security service. Other important thing is the quality of the MSSP. So I mentioned about the resources. Now, this is absolutely applicable to MSSPs also, right? So I took an example of a NIST. I mean, you can take any framework, but I took NIST as an example, from identification to recovery. You may have the first MSSP good at first 3 areas, somebody else good at the middle piece, somebody else good at somewhere else. So how do you make sure that which MSSP would you choose? I mean, I'm talking representing a company who has been a leader in MSSP for probably 11 years now in Gartner and Forrester and all that, right? So, but as an end customer, how do you ensure that? How do you pick the right MSSP? How do you make sure that there is a right quality? And these are all challenges. But I'm going to talk about even further challenge, right? Which is accountability, right? Now, when there is a breach, the MSSP can always say that, Mr. Customer, we didn't alert you because we didn't receive the log. So we didn't receive logs. We cannot do magic. We didn't receive log because you didn't have good controls in place, right? Now that accountability will fall back on the customer, right? Now the logs is a very important thing. I didn't receive logs because I didn't have interception. So because you didn't have good security controls in place. Now threat actors are becoming smarter and smarter. They are bypassing the traditional security controls. So no logs are present. How do you deal with this, right? Now, this is where I just want to talk about the pyramid of pain, right? So probably you would have seen this, how easy it is for a threat actor to bypass a security control, right? So if you go from bottom up, you look at IP address and hash values, and very easy, very easy for threat actor to change that. So it is very difficult for us to so we can easily include an IP address, but very difficult for us to detect because they can easily change that. You go further up, talk about domain names. Further up, you talk about network and host artifacts. So we could talk about telemetry, right? What we collect from the host. Okay. Now, so probably this could be registry modifications, file modifications, lateral movements, privilege escalations, those kind of things. Okay. I'll come to that in a second. But if you go further up, there is something we call as TTPs, which is tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? Now, this is, if you really look at a breach or any mishap, okay, you look at fundamental questions, which are when you do a root cause analysis, you ask fundamental questions. Question is, hey, what did happen? When did this happen? How did this happen? Where did this happen? Those questions. But there are two questions which are very difficult to answer. So first question is why? Why did this happen? What is the motive behind this? Is it a financial reason, financial crime? Is it nation state? Is it politically sponsored or something? What exactly is the reason? So why? That is a very important question. And second is who? Who are the people behind this? Right? Now, these two questions, to answer these two questions, you need to have a very good security research team. Now, when you are, I'm sure you could be already working with some of the current providers. So you'll have to ask them, how good is your security research organization, right? So how are they getting their security research? Very important to understand that, right? Now, coming back to the artifacts, that's what I meant by artifacts, right? So the amount of information you should have to have a fundamental, to do things like threat hunting, you need to have that level of information. Is your current security control providing that level of information to your managed security service provider or to your own SOC? It's worthwhile to ask that, right? So whether you have that level of visibility onto your endpoint, and that's how the MSS start evolving, right? So in the past, it used to be very much like a compliance driven. So I've heard people many years ago talking about, I'm less worried about hackers. I'm more worried about auditors. Auditors will come and ask me for compliance reports, right? So, but those days are slowly fading away. And now we talk about log retention, remote SIEM monitoring, security alert monitoring, that kind of a thing. But then the market is further moving. So where you need a little bit more than that. So instead of just saying, Mr. Customer, there is a problem, you should also be able to be in a position where a customer would challenge you. And it's like, hey, you're saying there is a problem. Can you give me more context? Give me contextual insights. Have you validated this before informing me that there is a problem, right? Is incident response and threat hunting part of this? Why don't you offer that? And if you offer that, how is your incident response team? Do you have capability to do this? Okay, so those questions started coming from the end customers. So which kind of generate or created a term in the industry called MDR, Managed Detection and Response. It's not very new. It came out in 2015 Q4 or something. That's where Gartner introduced this terminology. It's nothing but combining lots of these functionalities of a SOC into, say, monitoring, investigation, incident response, threat hunting, the content management of the platform, making sure that the platform is kept properly, all that. And then all these could be different teams, individual teams, but they need to make sure that there are true positive alerts, passing on from investigation team to incident response. There is a complete collaboration between different teams, right? So we used to call as defense in depth. You may be remembering defense in depth as a term which everybody used to talk about. Defense in depth, you have more controls in place. Now that's slowly going away to more of a defense in concert. Now, Secureworks, the ex CTO of Secureworks, John Ramsey, so he introduced this term defense in concert. So we should not just look at increasing your security controls one by one, or instead you should look at within your existing security controls, how do you make sure that you get maximum value? How do you leverage this? Right. So that's where the MDR as a terminology started evolving, where they need to talk to each other. Right. So investigation is important. You need to have incident response. You need to have threat hunting. You need to have a turnkey technology stack. I'll come to that in a second. More context. You also need to be having some sort of an ability to do containment or disruption, or what do you do if you are in the middle of the incident? Those are the questions. And very, very important is the platform. Is your platform capable of delivering something like this? Now this is where a concept called SOC Triad. So as a concept that evolved. Now this was around end of 2015. So an analyst named his name is Anton Chwacking. So he used to work for Gartner those days. Now he's working for Google Chronicle, I think. Now he came up with this concept called SOC Triad. Now basically what he said is that a SIEM should be augmented to get more visibility, not only from the endpoint but also from the network. Your NDR, network logs. You should also get it from your EDR, NDR, and SIEM all combined into one. So it was fine, good concept. Everything was nice. People already had a SIEM in place, deployed an EDR, NDR, applied some threat intelligence, have orchestration platform, vulnerability management. It was all fine. The fundamental issue was the defense in concert was still missing. Now they were all working in silos. Right, so deployed in silos, they had some sort of integration, but it was not one common platform. So everything was kind of segregated, individual, different vendors, and all that. Now we are seeing a trend where companies are kind of acquiring different specific vendors and trying to build that platform. Now this is where actually the concept called XDR evolved. X could be anything. In old algebra terms, or it could be extended detection and response. Extended detection and response is, in my view, it's not a technology. Everybody talks about XDR now. Every vendor talks about XDR. XDR is more of a moment. It's a moment in SOC operations where you bring in telemetry from any security control you can. Endpoint, firewalls, IPS, your NTAs, DLPs, CASBs, you name it. Bring everything to a common data lake, apply normalization, apply correlation, and then have an integration with your incident response, have an integration with your ticketing system, have an integration with your orchestration platform. Now that's the way XDR as a solution started evolving. Now the good news is, so we looked at some surveys. So this was done by ESG, which is an analyst organization. You may browse them, a pretty good research organization, and they came up with why you need to look at an XDR. So they said, like, it's a simplified visualization of complex attacks and understanding how they will proceed. So that is that. Advanced analytics that can detect and identify modern attacks, automated response capability. These were the top parts. And there was another interesting question. There are lots of questions. I just took two here. Another interesting question was that, are you willing to replace your existing controls with an XDR? Now, this is where majority of the people, I mean, half of the people said, like, yes, we are willing, and another half said, like, maybe we need to prove. So we need to be convinced that this is the way forward. And very, very small percentage said we are not sure and we may not want to do that. Right now, this is encouraging. Now, why it is encouraging is because there are too many vendors out there who in security. I think there are about 78 security tools per organization. That's an average, right? So this could be in different places. Now, this is you may be in a situation where you do not know which one to choose for. Now, this is where the technology is converging, right? So I'll make sure that I give you enough time to ask questions. I'm getting to the end part of my presentation. This is where the technology is converging, right? So if you remember the Gartner adaptive methodology, adaptive security framework, it used to have predict, detect, prevent, response. So those four pillars, and that's kind of we used to have lots of security controls, right? EPPs and EDRs and vulnerability management and everything. And over the time, we see all of that kind of converging the market into smaller buckets where you have predict, prevent, detect, and respond. Pretty much all of this, right? Now, threat detection response (TDR) is one area. XDR is an area where extended detection and response, and next gen SIEM. So we don't have, unfortunately, a Forrester Wave or a Gartner Magic Quadrant or anything on any of these lines, but that's where kind of the industry is moving. And what I really want to introduce here is the Secureworks platform. Now, Secureworks created a platform we called a Stages XDR, purely looking at three areas. So if you remember the first slide which I presented, so that is the way we looked at it, right? So what are the fundamental challenges a SOC would face? Now, this platform was created by security, our SOC team to help the SOC. So created by the SOC team to help the SOC, kind of a thing, to do detection, investigation, and response. So we can talk more on the platform in further sessions and all that, but I just want to make sure that that's a platform which we build, which would be making sure that we have a extended detection and response, where with a almost all the problems which I mentioned in the past, things like simplified licensing cost, we made it extremely simple, making sure that we leverage the existing investments the client is making by using some of the existing investments, whether it is your firewalls or EDRs or those kind of things. So we make sure that those things are completed properly. And in addition to that, we also did something which I really like, because if you look at 15 years ago or 20 years ago, vulnerability management was one of the biggest challenge any organization faced. And today, if you ask a CISO, still it is one of the biggest problems, right? Although it may sound very simple, vulnerability management is an extremely complex problem. And we looked at, we have a solution, and basically a platform which will do four things, right? So one is discover your assets. How many assets you have within your organization? Second is do the vulnerability scanning. So once you get the vulnerabilities, say 17,000 vulnerabilities, how do you make sure that which ones do you need to patch today? You need to have a prioritization. So vulnerability prioritization. And then a remediation plan on, hey, if I make these 5 patches, this will solve my 230 vulnerabilities, which are critical to me as an organization, based on my asset criticality, based on my, I don't want to go into details, but so this is pretty close. I mean, because I feel like this will add so much of value, because you need to understand what your weakness is before you put a shield in front. You need to understand where your weakness is. So vulnerability management is extremely crucial, right? Now, I would ask, like, you may always think like, is SIEM getting over? Okay, I won't say SIEM is not over. So era of SIEM is not over. So that's not the case. But majority of a standard requirement can be addressed using XDR. So you may still need a SIEM for your business and IT analytics and complex business use cases. You may still need that. But majority of your threat detection use cases, your threat detection scenarios, when I talk about your EDRs and all of that, your XDR platform will be a pretty good choice. My last slide before we get to questions is, if you want to take away something from this presentation, I've put few bullet points just to make your life easier, right? So the first one is you reevaluate your SIEM. Your telemetry is important. SIEM should not be just collecting some logs and throwing some alerts. It should be more than that. So are you collecting telemetry? Very, very important. Right? Second point which I want you to take away is, I've seen lots of EDR players saying that, hey, we are MDR. Now, EDR is not XDR. EDR is not MDR. EDR is just one part of the overall solution. I cannot say that I have my front door locked, but I've kept my back door and windows and everything open. I cannot feel secure inside. So I need to make sure that endpoint is just one entry point. I need to make sure that every other entry points are covered. I should still be monitoring my firewalls and my proxies and Active Directories and DNS and AVs and all of that. Very, very important, right? You need to look for improving your incident investigation maturity. So there should be a workflow in place. How do you investigate your incident? There should be some idea. You cannot have an MSSP taking care of everything 100%. That's a very false approach. So that's a third one which I want to say. Incident response threat hunting should be must have. So when RFPs are coming out, I would love to see incident response threat hunting included as must have, not as optional, because that is not optional anymore, right? reduce the attack surface by implementing an effective vulnerability management solution. Very, very important, right? And last part, which I would say, keep the defense in concert. No more defense in depth, keeping the defense in concert. You made an investment. How do we leverage the existing investment? How do you make sure that you're preparing for the future? I would say, because already this future is very near, right? So, yeah, that's where it is.